Are you getting caught up in the latest health trends and feeling overwhelmed as to what diet is best? We get it, and that's why, as leaders of wellness in our community, Joanne's Place Health Foods has created the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On this podcast, you can expect community and brand experts to share impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I'm a holistic nutritionist in partnership with Joanne's Place and your host for this podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. We've took a little break over the last few weeks to enjoy the warm summer days and plan for our next year. Today, we are back at it with Naturopathic Doctor Owen Wiseman to chat about back to school. Yes, you heard me right. It is time to get back to our daily healthy habits and routine to start the school year season strong. But don't worry, we are here to help. And in this episode, we're going to provide you practical ways to support your children this year to strengthen their immunity, improve their sleep, and keep them focused all year round. Before we get into it, join me in welcoming Owen onto the podcast. Hello, Owen. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, Marissa, thank you for having me. I'm great. And you know what? I'm enjoying every ounce of summer that we can while we have it, because as Canadians, we know we're going to be complaining about the cold soon enough.
I completely agree. I feel like the last few mornings has been a little bit of that cool, crisp fall feeling. So I too am trying to enjoy as much of summer as we have left. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to chatting more with you. But before we talk about back to school, can you start by telling our listeners a little bit more about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Owen Wiseman, as Marissa mentioned, and I'm a naturopathic doctor here in Ottawa, Ontario as well. So our beautiful capital right by the river. And that's just actually one of the different hats that I wear. So I've always been really interested in long-term solutions and avoiding those appointment by appointment solutions that we tend to get, where we just keep waiting to figure out the next thing that goes wrong in our bodies. And I've got a really keen interest in healthy aging, creating a safe space for LGBTQ plus individuals, and really helping to close that gap for overlooked patients and marginalized patients as well. On the other side, and in joining this podcast as well, I'm the medical advisor and consultant to Avogel, which is one of the phytopharmaceutical companies here in Canada. And I've sat on different boards and committees, really with a passion in promoting equitable access to nature therapy across North America. And I think any of us can really think back to a time where we were in nature and felt really incredible. Now it's just actually prescribing nature, and how do we make sure that people get outdoors and can access the outdoors? So it's a lot of different hats that I shuffle through the week, but I'm passionate about every single one of them, and it keeps me occupied.
Yes, for sure. Definitely lots of hats, which is amazing. And it's so interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other morning just about, the rising costs of everything, added pressure, added stress. And the point of the podcast was really coming back to just looking at what is accessible to us that isn't costing us anything. And one of the biggest things was nature and connecting to nature. So I love to learn all about that as well too, maybe later down the road. But today we are going to talk about children. And I actually don't have any kids of my own, but I know that there's a large population of parents who are looking for more natural, effective, and realistic ways to support their children, especially as we enter the new school year. I think after a couple years of unknown as to whether or not kids will be staying in school, going back to learning online, this hopefully, fingers crossed, is a year where parents can take that question out and we can keep all kids in school and keep them healthy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And obviously at Joanne's Place, I see amongst my coworkers, my friends, lots of people coming in, they're looking for those safe, natural alternatives for their children. So the top three concerns I see them coming in to navigate are typically sleep, frequent illness, and then trying to keep their child engaged and focused at school. So I want to talk about all three of those areas, but let's start with sleep because this is probably the most common I'm seeing. How important is a proper sleep schedule for kids? And what would that ideal quote unquote sleep schedule look like for children?
I think I'm there with you in the no children category, but within my own practice, I get this question a lot. And you have stressed out parents who just, how do I keep my child down for the night? It's all I want. And I want a good night's sleep. I want to make sure they wake feeling rested. So I definitely see this question come through a lot. And the big answer is that it's very dependent on age because you can have a range from upwards of 15 hours of necessary sleep as an infant, but that steadily drops by about an hour and a half every few years until you hit your teenage years. And as a teenager, what we're tending to see is the perfect kind of amount of time for a teenager to sleep is about 9 hours and 15 minutes. And it just keeps coming up in the research that that seems to be the sweet spot. So when we have a teenager sleeping in the morning, let them take that extra hour. They probably need it. So the ideal perfect world, we have our infant sleeping for 15 hours. Maybe that includes some naps, but it's tough. And there's a lot of sleep health organizations that we're recognizing about 25% of kids out there actually aren't sleeping enough. And there's a couple of different camps that are approaching this. They're talking about, well, is our start time for school too early? Do we look at shifting that back? But that has a lot of ripple effects in the community, especially for working parents. And naps are really important too. So when I chat with parents, one thing we do talk about is the child napping. And we want to make sure that they do get those naps in, because even when you look at studies, say out of China, where they have naps after lunch in school, their behavior, academics, and happiness all improve. And that's a really big thing. We want happy kids. We want kids who are succeeding as well. So the perfect sleep schedule arguably doesn't exist because there's a big play of nature versus nurture and how much that family's own schedule impacts the child. So as long as they're getting that amount of sleep, say 15 hours as an infant, 13 hours once you get into early toddlerhood, 11 hours once you get into that 8 to 10 range, and then about 9.25 once you're in your teens, as long as they're getting that amount of sleep, they're going to do okay. And what we've tried to do now is almost hyper medicalize sleep routines and sleep hygiene. And really, you don't need the lavender diffusing, the perfect pillow temperature, the perfect duvet. As long as it's dark and cool in the room, that tends to work for most people.
Yes. And I think, as you said, really amping up that nighttime routine can also be another stress for parents to get all of those things in the evening. And I've talked to people about it's like, I can't add another step to my night. I just need it to be, nice and, simple and things like that. So it's so interesting also about naps, because I feel like, you have those as an infant and a toddler, and then maybe through early preschool. And then that kind of goes away sometimes, but maybe they should just keep having naps throughout all public school and high school. And that might play a different role as well through the day.
Oh, absolutely. What teenager wouldn't like a 20-minute power nap after lunch?
Exactly. Okay. So another concern I see a lot of is frequent illness. And it's almost hard to talk about this topic, I think, amongst anybody right now, just through, people being talked so much about illness, but it's still something we see a lot of. And it's a huge stressor because we know that as soon as a child gets sick, they may have to change, their schedule in terms of their school and daycare protocols that require them to either stay home or do more tests and things. It's just become a very big chaotic stress for parents and for children that constantly have their schedules changed day to day. So as parents, what are your suggestions on how they can prevent their children from picking up every single little sniffle that comes their way to their best ability?
Yeah, one, I definitely want to acknowledge, I agree with you in every sense about just the chaos of the past 2 years and trying to reorganize their schedule. And my partner is an educator, so I got to see the behind the scenes and how much work he was putting into making sure everyone was supported and felt supported, and the kids and the parents, and answering emails late at night. So it is school is stressful. That's the big takeaway. I think all of us can appreciate a little bit more after the past 2 years. But to prevent them from getting sick, I find I have this conversation a lot, especially with new parents. So when it's your first child, you're still learning what to expect. And although every single person in your life, kids or no kids, is providing you their advice and their input, which can be appreciated, but sometimes is not, we want to remember that most kids will get sick about 6 to 8 times a year. That's average. If you have a child who's getting sick about a dozen times a year, what's going on there? Are there some gaps, say, in their nutrition? Are there some gaps in their lifestyle? Do we want to think about maybe immunocompromised situations or illness? And then on the flip side, if you have a kid who's only getting sick about 3 times a year, hey, great. You are still doing way better than the average. And that's definitely something to celebrate, because as a parent, whatever you're doing is helping and obviously is the right thing. And I think the foundation of it all does come back to making sure you have all of the basic building blocks to actually support all the different systems and immune warriors that are battling all of these infections at any given day. The other big thing is making sure your kids are active. The screen time, it's easy to hand our kid an iPad and just let them sit on that for 3 or 4 hours to give ourselves a break. However, we really know that, especially before the age of 6, we really, really want to limit screen time. And when there is screen time, we need to make sure that it happens with a purpose or a goal in mind, because that will help the child cognitively develop. But we want to avoid those sedentary behaviors. So, if your kid really wants to look at the phone, okay, but can we look at the phone while we're out on a walk? So making sure your kids are moving, they need a significant amount of movement time. And when you look at adults, we need about 150 minutes of active exercise per week. Kids need about 300. So you're doubling that. So that's about an hour every single day if you break it down. And we need to make sure that our kids are moving, because that will help keep their immune system strong and keep them battling things. And then nature therapy as well. I mentioned that I'm a big advocate and proponent of that. But when you look at the data, kids in rural areas actually get sick less often. And allergy and asthma rates are higher in urban industrialized area. And there's been a lot of really, really neat research coming out, especially of our East Asian regions or in Denmark. And what they've done is actually started to regreen playgrounds. So we're used to a playground being asphalt and dirt and stone, but now what they're doing is regreening it. And these kids are actually healthier. They have higher microbial diversity in the gut, which helps protect you against different illness. So those are the big ones that I typically start with parents. Make sure they're moving. Make sure you're getting the basic building blocks through a good, healthy diet, and also get them outdoors. Let them play in the dirt. If they eat it, so be it. They've probably eaten weirder things at home. So those are kind of my big 3 that I always make sure parents are aware of, especially my new parents.
Amazing. I appreciate so much that you've come back to those foundational pieces, because obviously working in a health food store, no matter what situation, it's people coming in looking for something that could support them right then and there. A pill, a liquid, a tincture, something. I know we're going to talk about something later on in today's episode, but I love that you stress, get those foundational things in place. 300 minutes. You said a week for children, correct?
A week. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So around an hour a day of getting outside, or moving the body in some sort, in whether it's in the house, playing, things like that. I love that. And then the building blocks. As a nutritionist, obviously, that's a huge aspect of what I focus on, is helping parents and adults and whomever to really make sure that those foundational building blocks are in place with a healthy diet. So great place to start, and just get those in place before looking at external additional things. Now, another thing I see a lot of parents struggling with, or not necessarily struggling with, but inquiring about, is helping their child stay focused in school. And I don't always like to come back to what's happened in the last 2.5 years, but this has been a huge disruption for children in staying focused because it's not necessarily an environment that they're immersed in. They're not necessarily going to a class, or they weren't for the last 2 years, going to a classroom where it was about learning. It was that whole energy and atmosphere of being at school has changed for them to transition to being at home. And as much as parents likely would have tried to recreate that environment, it's something that, we haven't necessarily seen the long-term effects of for the children. So for those children trying to stay focused, whether it is grade school or even university, college, I know I work with Trent and Fleming students, and I've had this conversation a lot, this major disruption of just feeling like you're in a learning atmosphere. What do we think parents can do to help with this type of transition back to going back to school and helping them stay focused?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise anyone to learn that disadvantaged kids were, as always, hit the hardest during the transition periods, as we all figured out how do we actually get the kids educated. We saw a lot of conversations around access to technology and equitable education and what's called unfinished learning. And of course, when you look at marginalized communities, there's huge proportions of children who are suffering from unfinished learning. And unfortunately, there was really a drive of let's just push these kids through no matter what. So even if they're not ready for grade 5, we're just going to slam them through. And that compounds where a lot of the kids, again, especially disadvantaged kids, feel inadequate because they just can't keep up to, say, the different wealthier peers who we saw were actually forming learning pods. So some of the parents would get together and they could afford bringing a private tutor to teach at a distance, to teach their group of 3 or 4 kids every single day after school. So they didn't actually lose out on education. And so that's been a big wake-up call, I think, for a lot of education organizations across North America and the world. And so when parents are trying to figure out how do I best support my kids through this, I think a lot of gentle love needs to be practiced, knowing that there are different learning styles. It really hit tactile learners significantly, where you have these kids, say, who are in wood class or carpentry class, and now all of a sudden they couldn't do any of that hands-on curriculum. These tactile learners really, really suffered. And perhaps you have kids who can't listen to a webinar for an hour and a half and actually take anything out of it. So it was a difficult time. And again, like I said, my partner's an educator, and just trying to do your best to make sure all the kids feel heard and feel that their questions were answered. Everyone was just trying to survive. Kids were just trying to stay above water, parents, teachers, everyone. And I think parents were vying for, now their home routine has changed. They have to attend to mealtime, whereas before they could just send their kid to school with an already packed lunch. Now there's that pressure where I'm at home, I'm going to make my kids something, but that takes away 45 minutes from a meeting I need to be on. So I wish I kind of had the perfect answer, but I think everyone just needs to be incredibly gentle on themselves, that the year was difficult for everyone. A lot of parents struggled and were irritable, and that's okay. And kids have unfinished learning. And as long as we recognize that affects a huge population, we don't feel so alone anymore. So the making sure that they're just eating, they don't have to eat the perfect diet. And we'll talk about that more as we go on, but we always get caught up, it has to be organic, and you're giving your kid white bread. And I'm probably like you, heavily work on the side of substitution. And we have patients and clients come to us so worried that we're going to take their bread. And it's kind of, you know what, have your bread, but can we switch it from white Wonder Bread to a whole grain? And then, you know what, in 2 months, once you've managed to cope with that, we might look at substituting some other things. So my big advice is just, as long as your little ones have some food that's of a decent quality in them, and they feel loved and they feel heard, that actually is the most important part throughout all of this. And we will all catch up and we will all get there together.
Yes, absolutely. Like parents, educators, children, the level of stress and adjustment has been significant. And again, really creating, space for wherever anybody is at, and knowing that eventually, like you said, we will get caught up, or we'll get to a place where the standards are just a little bit different than they used to be. And that is okay, because I think a lot of people are still in survival mode. So just getting to a place of health, meeting the bare minimum of the foundations, like movement, like nutrition, whether it is just substituting to something a little bit better, and understanding that we don't have to do it all right away, that we can just kind of
Hmm.
build those habits up. So we know that those lifestyle habits and creating that routine, like exercise, like proper meal planning, proper meal timing, things like that, it can take time. And when we don't see those changes happen right away, it can be challenging to stick towards them. Now, with that being said, I do encourage you to keep going with those healthy habits. But another way in which we can see some results, like boosting the immune system, like improving sleep, or also helping with focus, is obviously looking towards some type of supplemental factor for children, to support them during a short period of time, or maybe longer, depending on what their lifestyle factors look like. So while we continue to make those lifestyle changes, do you think that there is a supplement on the market that could support children, maybe even if it's just one, possibly two or three, that could kind of make their way into these parents' homes to support their kids in this upcoming school year?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Is we always love to get things through diet, but like you and I would know very, very well, you could be eating the most perfect nutrient dense diet in the entire world, but you have irritable bowel disease. And so how much are you actually absorbing? And I see this all the time when we'll look at a diet, we'll analyze what's in the diet, and then we'll run lab work. And it's kind of, all right, you're eating 100 milligrams of zinc per day, but your zinc levels are really, really low in the body. So you're probably not absorbing it. And that's why I lean heavily on what's called strategic supplementation. So we can get very targeted depending on the situation for that person, where we'll look at a certain type of fish oil, or we'll look at a certain type of magnesium, let's say. But at the end of the day, all of us just need to meet basic nutrition. And if we can't get all of it from our diet, then that's when a supplement is really indicated. And one of the worst things I hear is people go to their GP and it'll be just eat better. Well, what does that mean? And we have a big conversation and unwrap that. And it's quite a detrimental thing to say, because you're putting the onus on the patient, and maybe they feel bad that they don't know what does better mean. And we go down the rabbit hole of the internet to find out what it means. So one of the biggest things is just a basic supplement, meet your nutrients. And that's why I really like a product called BioStrath. It's out of Switzerland, and actually sold at Joanne's place. But BioStrath is a really important one because it has all of those basic building blocks. So you get your entire host of B vitamins, you get the entire spectrum of essential amino acids, which is really important because we can't get those in our own body. We can't synthesize them in our body. So we need to get them through diet. And then the other added bonus of it is that we actually get additional nutrients like L-carnitine, which helps with energy production. We get glutathione in there, which is the master antioxidant to help decrease inflammation and cell damage across the entire body, including the brain. So when we think about kids trying to focus and concentrate during school, glutathione is going to become really important. So this tends to be where I start. We see how the little one responds to meeting all those basic nutrients. And then we go from there. And we might have to up the dose or give a certain nutrient depending on their condition. But that's where we start, is let's just meet the basics.
Yes, absolutely. Now, some of our listeners might be like, BioStrath, I recognize that because it has been around a long time, and it has been like a tried and true supplement at Joanne's place amongst our staff, our owners. They swear by it, also our community. So what makes this BioStrath multivitamin so unique and like none other on the market?
Yeah, it's definitely a product that almost needs to have a conversation because it's so interesting and there's a lot of history to it. So it was actually founded by Fred Pestalozzi in 1961. So originally it was made by a pharmacist, Dr. Walter Strathmeyer, and that's where the Strath comes from. And Fred Pestalozzi, who was the current CEO's father, who founded the company, had Meniere's disease, which is something with the ear and your vestibular system for balance. And so, anyway, he had tried all these things, nothing was working. He went to Dr. Walter Strathmeyer, asked him about whether he had anything that could help. He was kind of at his wit's end with being off balance and having difficulties there. And so, Dr. Strathmeyer gave him this elixir, is what they call it. And then his Meniere's actually disappeared. And Fred Pestalozzi was a businessman himself. And he went, this is an incredible product. I need to get it to as many people as I can. So bought the product from Dr. Strathmeyer, and there was born BioStrath. So it's a fermented multivitamin and more is usually how I try and describe it. So what they do is they collect a whole bunch of different plants and herbs that are grown on the grounds over in Switzerland. And then what they do is actually put them into these 12,000 liter tanks that sit deep, deep, deep into the earth. It's hard to fathom how big the tanks are. And they'll sit there for 2 months. Now, they're not just sitting there doing nothing. What's added is actually Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So it's a yeast species. And before anyone gets too worried, it actually helps protect against candida. So don't worry about any yeast infections. And what the yeast does is, because they're microscopic, they can break down these plants and herbs to a level that the human body, we're just not nearly as efficient. Plus, we have a lot of inflammation usually in the gut. So that definitely impacts our efficiency. And so it ferments for 2 months. And we already know how much benefit there is with fermented food. So you get the added value of a fermented multivitamin. And then we get all of these different nutrients that have been broken down to their most basic building blocks. And it's all based off of plants and herbs. So it's a really powerful product. And I love the fact that we are getting all of the different nutrients that go beyond just a basic multivitamin. So you get lecithin in there, you get mannan, you get the different ubiquinones as well. So Q6, Q7, Q8. So it's a really versatile product, and it is good for the whole family. And that's what I really like is we often see, oh, this vitamin is specifically for women 40 to 60, or this one is specifically for men between the ages of 70 and 75. And we focus on getting so targeted that we don't recognize, why don't I just stock one product at home that's good for everybody? It'll be happier for my wallet, and it'll be happier just for my mental health, where I don't have to think, okay, my wife needs that, my kid needs that, the other kid is a bit of an athlete, so they're going to need that. It gets almost too targeted. Whereas if everyone just met the basic building blocks, probably the whole family would do better.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's so important to note, is it's one product that can be suitable for the entire family, which is amazing. What we're seeing amongst, children and adults, but a lot of children are having some type of allergy or sensitivity come up. So is BioStrath safe for all children with allergies, or is there some parents that should stay away from this product?
Yeah, so allergies wise, that's why I like it as an option. It doesn't contain any known allergenic substances. And even in post-marketing surveillance, we have not recorded any allergic reactions to the Strath herbal yeast. Now, the tablets get recommended for people with a gluten or fructose intolerance because the elixir does have honey in it. So even if you have people who are vegan or diabetic, then we just kind of switch them over to the tablet version because you get to avoid that. And that's why I like it again, where you don't, if you do have those conditions, you don't have to avoid it because there are options for you. The other benefit is all types of the BioStrath products are suitable for anyone with a lactose or a histamine intolerance as well.
Okay, perfect. So what is the recommended dosage for children? And also, what is the best way for parents to administer this to their children? Right off the spoon, mix it in something? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so I would have had a very different answer if you had asked me last year, but we've actually just released BioStrath Junior, and it's a 250 ml bottle for kids that are aged 4 and up. So the dosing is 1 teaspoon twice a day until 8 years old, and then 3 times a day up to 13. And then between the ages of 13 to 18, they can be taking 2 teaspoons twice daily. Now, I tend to be someone, and the young people in my life tend to be someone who it's hard to remember to take things multiple times. We try our pill organizers where we have Monday through Friday and say 9 a.m., noon, and 5 p.m. But for a lot of people, this can be really difficult. So especially for kind of the kids between the ages of 4 to 8, I'll typically just do 2 teaspoons once a day because it's easier to remember in that sense. In terms of the ways to take it, I will admit that the elixir kids tend to go for over any of the other products. The reason being you have the honey in there. There's natural orange flavor as well. So kids find that one really nice. And I have put it over frozen yogurt and drizzled it because it does have a bit of a thicker syrupy texture. And honestly, they really like it. I have a colleague who has a elite swimmer daughter, and she'll put it into her smoothies. So she'll do her protein shakes and everything, and she'll put say 2 teaspoons into her daughter's smoothie to make sure that she's actually getting it. And honestly, the honey orange flavor just really adds to a nice smoothie in the morning, especially.
Okay. So easy to take, not taking it several times a day necessarily. And yeah, it tastes good, which is usually what parents are asking.
Yeah. And that's the main thing that the kids are concerned about. They couldn't care less about the nutrient value.
Yeah, just as long as it tastes good.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of taking the BioStrath, do you recommend taking this year round, or do you recommend only when a child is sick or in or around people that are sick?
Yeah. So I do tend to recommend it as just add it to your daily routine, because it's something that you're trying to account for. The diet fluctuates. Most people's diet fluctuates a lot. Children not as much, because the parents tend to be in control in the younger years and will, for the most part, try and stick to foods that the kids like to make sure they're actually eating. Now, so that's one thing. But because even with kids, the diet fluctuates so much, taking a basic multivitamin that they like, it's not a bad thing. And what I like about BioStrath is the dosing in the product in terms of what's actually in it is a lot lower than what we're used to seeing in a lot of the North American made multivitamins, where it's almost, let's put as much as possible into this in hopes of just saturating every receptor in the body. And there's a reason why when you've taken 2 of the kind of North American made multivitamins, our urine is neon yellow. We're probably peeing out over 80% of what was actually in there. So that's why I like BioStrath as an option, because it's already fermented. It's easy to digest. The bioavailability is a lot better. And we know that clinically, it's been proven that you absorb more when you're taking BioStrath. And that study was done out of UBC, I believe. So it's pretty amazing to actually see you get the nutrient absorption. So I would suggest it daily, because really, if it's something the whole family can get, it's easy to add to the routine. You're accounting for those fluctuations in diet. You can ramp it up when they're getting sick, but for most people, that should help prevent sickness.
Yes. And I think another thing to stress here is when we have a consistent routine, one, it decreases our stress of trying to, figure everything out and make sure you've checked every box every day. If you just put it into routine, it's there. And then also, I don't want to predict the future, but if there is a time where we get stressed or your children get stressed, that is there to also reduce that stress response already, because you're getting the nutrients just to support the body as much as possible. So it might lessen the chance of, if the kids do get sick, it will be a shorter duration, and it'll be less of a stress on the body. So I agree. Just keeping those staples in as a routine year round will be beneficial overall in the long run.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. So, for our listeners that are tuning in right now, if you're interested in learning more about BioStrath, definitely pop into one of our Joanne's Place locations to learn more. As I said, this product has been around for decades and it has been a staple in our team's supplement regime, as well as our owners. It is one of our top recommended products, and it's there to support you and your children if you need it. I want to thank you so much, Owen, for taking the time to chat with us today and help the parents of our community prepare for back to school.
Hey, we all need all the support we can get, and we need to come together and help one another. And absolutely, all the staff I can vouch for at Joanne's Place are just so knowledgeable about the product. So I highly encourage anyone listening right now to just go in and have a conversation, because they're going to be able to answer your questions. And if not, by all means, you can reach out to our team at avogel.ca, or if you would like to chat personally, which I always love to do because I end up learning more from you than you might from me, you can head to my website at owenwiseman.ca and we'll set up a conversation. But I am so grateful to Marissa and all the team at Joanne's Place for making sure that everyone in Canada is staying wise about their health and keeping their nutrition up there.
Yes, absolutely. And I will leave the information to Owen's website in the description as well. Thanks again, Owen. If you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. You know what to do now. Be sure to subscribe to our channels so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. And also find us on social media and share that you are listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.